What's the worst thing you've done in the heat of the moment? Middle of summer, caught my girlfriend cheating, and in the heat of the moment threw my fan at the wall. I was not only sad and alone but sad, alone and sweaty that fateful night. Told the judge, "Jimmy, your best shot." 10 added days for contempt of court. My dad and I got into an argument when I was 6 years old, so I wrote my very specific, very rare first name across the side of his brand new car with a stone. When he asked me if I'd done it, I, of course, denied it profusely. I'm talking Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice underscore level of acting. I should won a goddamned Oscar. So he sort of laughed and said, "You're telling me someone else came up to my car and scratched your name across it?" I denied it for a whole afternoon while, in fairness to him, my father giggled to himself. I couldn't figure out why he was giggling. Surely he was going to skin me alive later and wear me around town of a cold evening. He said he couldn't help laughing because the lie was so ludicrous, but I stuck by it so resolutely that it was one of the funniest situations he'd ever been in. He knew he should punish me, but it was also so marvelous he couldn't bring himself to be angry. I'm nearly 36. Every time he gets a new car now he says, "You're not mad at me for something, are you?" before he shows it to me. I guess I earned that. Texting when I'm pissed off. The anger goes away, the text remains for eternity. I don't know about heat of the moment, but when a cop asked why I thought I could go that fast down that road, I, without thinking, responded because I always do, then realized what my mouth had just said without consulting my brain, and proceeded to lay my head against my steer wheel forcefully in shame. I was probably 10 to 12 hanging out with the neighborhood kids, one being a few years younger. He was being annoying as and wouldn't stop, so after a few minutes of constant annoyance I threw my scooter at him, hitting his head. No serious injuries, but he needed a few stitches. I knew I up the instant the scooter left my hands. I had gotten into a fist fight with my stepdad when I was 14 and got kicked out of the house. My dad picked me up and was lecturing me about making good decisions and asked me, "Do you want to grow up to be a criminal loser?" I told him, "At least I won't work a dead-end job and grow up to be like you." The instant it left my mouth I regretted it. He even shot back with exactly, "I want you to be better than me," and I could tell it hurt him. The part is, he did everything for me and still does. The conversation pops into my head from time to time, and I still feel horrible about it. Edit: I did apologize to him later that same day. What I said came from a place and he knew that. Regardless, I still think about it, and it bothers the hell out of me that I could say something like that to someone who did nothing but try and make my life infinitely better than his was growing up. I didn't do it, but it happened near me. I was working construction one summer. The veteran guy working with me got into a fight with the foreman and came back to the floor we were working on all pissed off, kicking things around. We were up on the 4th floor, and windows hadn't gone in yet. He picks up a huge level and flings it out the window. About 5 seconds later said, "That was mine." Late night impulse buys. In the height of the pandemic I ended up buying a little too expensive rowing machine for my apartment, thinking I was going to be all fit. Now it's just collecting dust in a corner. My parents were tailors and they used to do a lot of work from home. They had really big heavy metal scissors they used to use. I was very young. Under 10 for sure. My older brother did something to piss me off. I grabbed the scissor near me and threw it at him. It missed his eyes by a small fraction. He went ballistic on why would I do something like this. 25 plus years later the memory still makes me sad how close I was to seriously injuring or killing my brother. Smoked crack. This was late 1990s. I was around 29. I was a pretty heavy meth user / seller, so I went to this lady's house who would usually have 6 if I brought over meth and got her high. When I got there she didn't want anyone in and there were 2 other guys there on the porch she wasn't letting in either. We talked for a secretary and said they had crack, but no lighter and no money top by one. I had a lighter. I gave them the lighter and smoked some crack with them. First time smoking crack and the last. Within 1 hour we ran out. They knew some gangsters they could trade their gold chains for more crack. There was no pondering, no thought process. Driving to the bad side of the entire county at 3 AM to trade gold chains for crack seemed like the best idea ever. I had a moment of clarity and oped out of there pretty fast. I used to be not so great of a guy. Clean since May 22nd, 2000. Threw my engagement ring in a fjord. I cold a hawk that sucker. When I was in 10th grade, a classmate of mine pissed on my shoes. I didn't not snap right then and there, but he made fun of my looks a couple minutes later. I completely lost my grabbed him by the neck and slammed his head into a steel beam. In hindsight I realize that I could have killed him or disabled him for life, but luckily he got away with a bad concussion. Told a girl I cold spent the rest of my life with her SMH. Girlfriend cheated on me in high school. Girlfriend's temporary boyfriend had a friend who keyed my car. She told me who did it, and I decided the best way to handle it was to take a plunger stick and go into his job at the mall and beat him in the face with it until the stick broke. Not my proudest moment. My oldest son was still a baby, and I was a fresh teenage dad. It was the middle of the night, and he was screaming. I was sleep deprived, and I was getting screamed at in my ear, and he was sick and cranky and nothing would help. I went to move him, and his baby fist hit me in the eye or something, but away. I swatted it away really fast and hard, and he cried even louder. I kept rocking him, and crying and holding him, even after he fell asleep. I felt so bad. Almost 9 years later, and I still feel awful about it. I shit in someone's shoe, because he got me lost in the city for 2 hours, in a bad part of town, with a dead phone, and no way of finding my own way home. I play guitar in a bar band. One night many years ago, after a gig, while loading up our equipment, some drunk guy decided he wanted to pick a fight. We tried to brush him off, but he wouldn't relent. Eventually, things got physical, and I ended up having a scrap with him. I defeated him handily. He was very drunk, and I was not. He did not accept this result, and went to get some of his friends. They came back, and attacked us from behind. Again, they defeated. Only this time, I was very pissed off. People were dragging Mr. Drunk and his pals away from our trailer when I spotted his baseball hat next to our back tire. I was so fired up that I picked it up and held it in the air to show it to him, then dropped it on the ground, exposed my penis, and pissed all over it in front of the crowd of people that had gathered. It felt very powerful in the moment. Until the police officer that the venue called to help us deal with the walked around the corner and saw me standing there with my d in my hand. 2 victories followed by a crushing defeat. Tough night at the office. I passed on a call offering me a pretty good job because I was super busy on my job at the time. After negotiating back and forth at a car dealership for a vehicle I really wanted, the car salesman said, "That's our final offer. Take it or leave it." His take it or leave it ultimatum and his condescending attitude made me get up and leave. Did not pull out. This is gonna be a sad one. So my best friend at the time wasn't doing very well, had to move back in with his parents, and had no job. I, being the general manager of a fast food restaurant, got him a job at my store. This dude was terrible. Messed up on every order, wouldn't listen, and would complain about everything. Finally one day he came into work drunk. It was pretty obvious, so I had to fire him. After I did, he was just staring at me with this up look and wobbling. I stupidly let my emotions get to me and said, "You look disgusting," right to his face. I remember he looked down at his shirt for a stain or something, and I vividly remember his face as he realized I wasn't talking about his clothes, but himself as a person. He looked so destroyed by that. Without saying another word he turned around and walked out of the building. 30 minutes later he shot himself in the head at his house. will ever forget the sound of his mom when I called her literally minutes after he died. Will forever haunt my dreams. People say don't blame yourself and all that. It's kinda hard when you were the last person he spoke to. I know if I didn't say that, he probably would have done it eventually anyways, because we all knew he was struggling. Since I knew, I definitely shouldn't have said that. I'll at least always believe I heavily influenced his decision. Thank you for all the kind words everyone. I do appreciate it. I do agree with all of you in the fact I was not the sole influence to his decision. For context and without going into too much detail, he did have a lot of other things going on, like relatively minor trouble with the law, drug problems, friends cutting him out, and such, so I see other things that contributed to it. Still stings though. Miss him a lot. It was quite a few years back, but I have a tattoo about him and have a bit of his ashes in a keychain I carry around everywhere. So although I don't particularly believe in an afterlife, I do have a way he's still somewhat with me. Anyways. Thanks for the support everyone. Gifted someone a ridiculous amount of money. Having sex with an absolute stud. He's taking me places I've never gone to before, making me babble in tongues and see stars. In the heat of the moment, I ask him for anal despite his size. Best sex of my life ends with an anal fissure and my butthole looking like the elevator scene from The Shining. I work hospital security, and we hold a lot of violent psych patients until they can be transferred to a behavioral facility. A surprisingly strong old man assaulted a nurse when she was trying to change his briefs, and I responded first. I was wrestling with the guy and trying to hold him in the bed until backup got there. He finally calmed down, looked me in the eye, and told me something to the effect of, "When I get out of here I'm going to kill you and rape your wife." And I responded, "Big words for a man in a diaper." I've never seen anyone rage harder. Dude genuinely tried his best to kill me. But thankfully my co-workers got there right afterward and nobody got hurt. I was in high school and said to my then boyfriend's dad that he was an abusive asshole. The consequences of that were just awful. Beat up someone inside of a church. Peak pandemic after coming off a furlough, resigning from my dream company, thinking was going to be laid off, and taking a new job across the country, and moving my family. Could have stayed, and would have avoided a layoff. Kids would have kept their friends. Wife and I would have kept our community. Did all of this thinking I was doing the right thing. Had such regrets. Thank you all for the words of affirmation and encouragement. Having a rough few days, and reading your comments gave me a bit of respite and joy. I told a kid who was relentlessly bullying me that I wished he wasn't even alive. He killed himself a week later. Probably losing all my money buying deeper into a lost option position on expiration day. Probably yelling at like 60 kids at once. I worked on campus a long time ago, and we were having some retreat over the summer where they dropped like 200 kids off to stay for like 5 days. Lots of problems were being caused by them not respecting anything and just being stupid kids. I was getting super annoyed with them, especially since I worked in the library and they would not shut the hell up. Anyway, fast forward to like day 3. I leave work and see my car covered in branches and other floral debris. I was pissed. I was seeing red and just looked at the kids across the street in the commons yard and just unleashed unholy hell upon them. Yelled so loud I was echoing across campus. The vein in my forehead pounding so hard my ears burned. The kids were scared, I was pissed, and my boss was so concerned, he asked if I needed to take tomorrow off to cool down. I told him I was fine, but these kids were on my last nerve. Anyway, like 5 years later, I was telling one of my best friends this story and he dropped a bombshell on me. It wasn't the kids. It was him and a fellow friend of ours. They wanted to prank me since they knew the kids were driving me crazy. I probably stared at him for like 2 solid minutes before saying I told those kids if I caught them anywhere near my car, it would be the last thing they'd do. Then I started laughing. Meo. Got me. My sister and I were in a bad fight, so after storming out of the room, I turned around and spoiled Game of Thrones. Question mark? Was the most brutal victory I ever achieved. She lost her. I was being lightly scolded by my boss, and instead of rolling with it, I got pissed and told him, you know what, suck my and left. I was not in a financial situation to quit at the time, and regretted my decision the entire elevator ride out of there, but looking back now it's easy to say worth it. I ruined my mother's Tupperware party by taking in a potted plant. I have no idea what I was thinking, or why I even did it, really. By all accounts I was like 2 or something. I'm sorry, Mom. Can we please just let it go? I was working in the back warehouse of a local store, and I was trying to tidy up. Someone wanted a trolley to take some stock out to the shop floor. They wouldn't wait and demanded a trolley immediately. So I picked up the trolley and threw it towards them. It almost hit 2 supervisors who were doing a stock take. I was given a talking to about it. For reference, the trolley was made of metal and not as light as I thought it was. Charged into a skinny 6th grader with time running out in a fundraiser staff vs family basketball game. Hundreds of people watching, and he lost his wind for a second, so he did that awkward can't breathe sound. First time I ever got caught smoking weed with friends hotboxing, cop rolls up, and did the whole crush it on ground, before I give you possession etc. After we got our warning, the cops still sat there by the parking lot entrance, and our paranoid friend goes, "No. They're baiting us for a DUI, we can't leave." Now what? Same friend decided to call 911 to report a bank robbery to get the cops to drive away. Nothing happened, we just said it and left 3 minutes later. A couple of years ago I was in a very bad mood, and my daughter, who was 2.5 at the time, did something that made me snap, so I took the drawing she was waving at me, screwed it up in a ball, and threw it across the room. I know that doesn't sound like much, but goddamn it broke her little heart. And by something I mean I don't actually know what she did. I couldn't even remember in the moments after the incident. It was like I blacked out in rage. I did seek help after this BTW. It turned out I had severe postpartum depression, had a newborn at the time too, and I was given meds and worked through it. And yes, I did comfort and apologize to her after. We sat on the floor and cried together, and I promised her that it would never happen again and that I would get help. Grabbed my stepfather by his jacket and threw him over the 2-foot garden surrounding my mom's porch. I can tell about my heat of the moment of this week. My husband's laptop had a broken charger for years. Now while I was using it, it totally broke. Laptop won't charge anymore, and he claimed I broke it. I was like, dude, this thing was broken for years, we all knew this would happen one day. He still said it was my fault, so I ordered 2 new laptops at 2 AM while angry. One for him, and one for me. I'm not sure what I was trying to prove here, but I'm almost to K-Pora now. Went out for a friend's birthday, and another friend was being an ass and real aggressive towards me. I called him out on it, and we ended up fighting outside the bar in a parking lot. Haven't spoken to him in years. He was like a brother. Damn you, Navy strength rum. Usually every time I've told someone off it was regrettable. I bought a microtransaction, the shame I felt after it. I'm a very peaceful person, I do not freak out, and I have never been in a physical fight with anyone, but I was so embarrassed to tell my friends. This isn't that crazy, but my old company spoiled me, and my new one did not. We had to buy all our own supplies without being reimbursed, which now I completely understand that's a work from home thing. But this was new to me, and I did not want to work from home to behind with. I was pissed off that my training documents were 60 pages long, and that I had to print them without reimbursement, because I had to print like 500 pages of nonsense. I got so mad, I smashed my printer with my foot and kept smashing it, and then it hurt my foot and cut me, so I threw the whole printer at the wall. The damage to the wall was pretty minimal, but the printer shattered into like 40,000 pieces that we found more after moving. I thought my boyfriend would be so mad at me, but he said, "I'm glad you finally allowed yourself to be mad about something. I don't care about the printer or the wall. Are you okay?" Now we laugh and say okay, just don't break that, too. Lol. Said I love you when I didn't. I tend to get irrationally angry when I get even slightly bothered and start yelling things like "F off." My neighbor's kid was ran out in the middle of the road when I was driving, and without thinking I yelled "F off" at him. He fell over crying on the spot, and my neighbor refuses my apology. I need to stop it. My sister wasn't very confident on a bike. My parents got her and me new bikes one summer. We went out riding and got into an argument. I jumped off my bike, pushed her off hers, then stomped out the spokes on both her wheels. This was 20 years ago. I still feel like about it, and she hasn't rode a bike since. Went to my old place of employment after hours, used the outdated code to enter the building, and cooked food, and poured myself a couple beers. Heavily overreacting while gaming and throwing the controller at the TV, just like those videos everyone makes fun of. I learned a massive lesson that day. Every mean thing I ever said to my sweet ex-boyfriend. I broke it off with a fiancé last fall. A fiancé is putting it lightly. She was the one. My mental health and bipolar began to consume me over the last few years, and eventually it got to the point where my paranoia was telling me that she was hurting me / slowing me down. I'm so thankful for the time we did have together, and I've accepted that I'll never have her back. What an amazing woman though. Water on Grease Sapphire. Poof. Not seeing Crazy, then having a kid with Crazy and marrying, said Crazy. Lost my virginity to a prostitute. I was 24 and was in a long distance relationship with a girl from Germany. I'd pretty much never had any experience dating until then, and after 3 to 4 months we made plans to finally meet up. I paid for her plane ticket, and the day before she was supposed to fly out she told me that she had feelings for someone else. I wasn't really keen on the whole open relationship thing, so I cut my losses and broke up with her. Never managed to get the money back, but fortunately it wasn't an absurd amount or anything. In any case, I had a mini breakdown. Basically convinced myself that I was never going to find someone else or lose my virginity, so I found a CD website that had a list of escorts in the local area and hooked up with one. I didn't really know what I was doing, but we switched between doggy style and cowgirl for a while. Problem is I was extremely nervous and couldn't finish. We went at it for half an hour or so until I realized it just wasn't happening. I awkwardly apologized, grabbed my clothes, and did the walk of shame back home. Felt a lot of shame and embarrassment for a while, but at the end of the day we were both consenting adults. There were probably better ways of handling the breakup though. Told my 7th grade teacher to go himself when he wouldn't make my 99% a 100% in a math test, because apparently I wrote the date dd/mm/y instead of y/mm/dd, but I'm from the Ukraine and had just moved to Canada. I'm still mad about that to this day. One time made out with a girl a little too much on the street after a nice date. After some time she dropped her keys, which had an anti-rape alarm thing attached to it. And neither of us knew how to turn that piece of off. I'll remember those people looking at us for my whole life now. I was a teenager. I was helping my family clear out our basement, sorting old clothes and toys to donate or dispose of. Me and my brother are horsing around when I spot an absolutely ancient water gun. I pick it up, swiping away cobwebs, and what do you know, water is sloshing around the reservoir. So I pump it a couple times and spray my little brother directly in his face. He screams instantly, and not the fun "haha you sprayed me with water" scream. The water smells like mold and death. It's left over from the last time we played with the guns, which was years ago. He gets a bacterial infection in both eyes, cycles antibiotics and comes away from it whole. I cat about this at every family gathering and will until one of us dies. Yell very aggressively at my kids in a way where I'm likely to throw something if it's nearby. Never at them. Hate myself every time. I need to get better. Coming out of a tolerance break and intended to eat one square, 30 milligrams of a 300 milligrams MJ chocolate bar. Bar partially melted and was no longer 10 small pieces, but one big piece instead. I said F it and threw the whole thing down the hatch. Able to function that evening at a family member's day party and went to bed right after dinner. Pretty much unable to function the next day either. Worst part was the family member celebrating the birthday passed away a few years later, so this was one of the last days we got to celebrate with him. I used to go to the gym and sneak into the health suite, sauna, steam room, hot tub, without paying. Got busted and had to pay on the way out. Manager was nice and said, look, just pay next time, okay? I said I won't get caught next time. She said consider your membership cancelled. Tried to stab a guy. Luckily I was pulled back by my father the very instant the blade touched his coat.